Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday session and you're ready to embrace the opportunities and challenges that 2026 has in store for us. Welcome to today's technical session hosted by the AAC Dallas D&DI chapter. My name is Mino Ajay and I'm the Vice President of this chapter. And I'm so excited, you can see the nervousness already, to serve as your moderator for this important discussion on 2025 Texas Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices Overview. As many of you already know, TMUTCD is a cornerstone document that establishes consistent standards for traffic control devices across Texas. With its recent update, effective January 2026, this manual will play a pivotal role in shaping the future of traffic engineering and roadway safety across Texas. Now, let me introduce our esteemed speakers for today's session, who bring a wealth of expertise and experience with them. First, we have Wes Pierce, PE, a traffic engineer with Kimley-Horn and Associates. Wes has over 7 years of experience leading traffic engineering projects across the country. As the consultant project manager for 2025 TMUTCD update, Wes has led a large team to ensure the manual aligns with the TMUTCD 11th edition. Wes serves as the technical committee member of the Regulatory and Warning Committee and the National Committee on UTCD, where he provides recommendations to improve the safety and effectiveness of the traffic control devices. Wes is licensed engineer in Texas and Virginia and holds the BS in Civil Engineering from George Mason University. Joining Wes is Amoni Madison, a civil analyst on the transportation team at Kimley-Horn. Amoni has been instrumental in development and implementation of the 2025 TMUTCD, ensuring its alignment with national standards to enhance traffic control and safety measures. Amoni has also contributed to the TSAP manual, creating training materials that improve its practical application. Amoni holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from University of Missouri, Columbia, and is passionate about improving the uniformity and effectiveness of traffic control devices to enhance road safety. And now, I'm so excited and nervous. Okay, Wes and Amoni will take us through the 2025 TMUTCD overview. And as they present, I encourage you to jot down any questions or thoughts you may have, so that at the end of the session, you can ask them and keep your phone on silent, and that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. We're really excited to be talking about the new 2025 TMUTCD. You're going to hear that acronym a bunch this morning. So it stands for the Texas Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. That's what we've been working on the past 2.5 years. So we're really excited to go over some of the background, some of the technical changes, and how that might impact you guys in the future. We're going to start off with an introduction, but before we do that, if you guys don't mind, just a show of hands, is anyone here not familiar with the TMUTCD? Have you never heard of this large manual? Okay, so we've got a few, so that's great. So we're going to go over some background, what is the TMUTCD, some of the technical items within it, and then we're really going to jump into the technical changes, some of the major updates in the new TMUTCD. But before we do that, we'll just do a quick intro. Mino just introduced us, but again, my name's Wes Pierce, traffic engineer with Kimley-Horn. I led the TMUTCD the past 2.5 years. I'm also a member of the National Committee on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So that's a committee where we develop recommendations at the national level. We develop recommendations for the FHWA as they update their TMUTCD for future federal revisions. I'm going to pass it over to Amoni. She's going to introduce herself, and then we're going to jump in and go over the background before we go over major items, major technical changes.
Is it the inner part or here? As we know, also stated, my name is Amoni Madison. I've been with Kimley-Horn for a little over a year and a half. And I've been kind of helping with the production and leading the production of the TMUTCD. So pretty excited to get to talk to you guys about the overall menu and what that means for you all. And yeah. The agenda today is just kind of talking about what the MUTCD is, the major changes of 2025 TMUTCD, and any frequently asked questions, and how this kind of impacts any projects that you're currently working on or in the future and things of that sort. A disclaimer, Kimley-Horn is not representing FHWA or TxDOT in any of the conclusions or findings, opinions, and things of that sort that we present today. Just kind of give you guys an overview on behalf of Kimley-Horn. Kind of briefly going over what the MUTCD is. It's a menu on uniform traffic control devices. So that includes anything from signage, markings, and signal design, things of that sort. It sets the minimum standard for any other state supplements and things of that sort. It provides guidance, any uniformity on control devices across the nation, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, and make sure there's no kind of overlaps and things of that sort, interference, and just to emphasize it is not a roadway design manual. Kind of went over this briefly. What is a traffic control device? That includes all things, like I said, signs, signal design, markings, and other devices that use color, shapes, and other things, messages to kind of just portray what the road users need to follow. Effective traffic control devices fulfill a need, command attention, convey a clear, simple message, command respect from road users, and give adequate time for proper response to anything that may be happening ahead in the roads. Who uses the MUTCD? There's a wide range of people who use it: consultants, contractors, any academic professionals, insurance and legal organizations, and other organizations where any traffic control devices apply. How frequently is the MUTCD updated? So the last MUTCD was in 2011. There are 11 editions of the MUTCD. The first MUTCD was released in 1935, so it's been going on for quite some time, just continuously with the updates of road users and things of that sort. The current MUTCD is released in 2023, so the TMTCD kind of follows shortly after that in 2025. And there's been 14 years between the previous manual, so as you imagine, there's a lot of new updates that have come with this new manual. And these are just kind of the covers from 2011, the last edition, to the current edition, 2025, that we'll be going over today. And just to cover on the national committee that Wes briefly talked about, we kind of cover all of the different segments. We're experts. We have someone from Kimley-Horn in almost all of the committees. So again, emphasizing that we're just really passionate and have experts all over within the MUTCD. And then with this, I'll pass it over to Wes.
So yeah, now we're going to jump into the technical content. TMUTCD is a huge document. There's somewhere around 1,300 pages. We're not going to go over all the items. We just want to highlight some of the major changes. We're going to focus on a few of the parts within the TMUTCD, and these are major changes from the previous 2011 TMUTCD. So we'll start with part 2. We're going to go over signs, some of the major changes to some regulatory and warning signs. Then we'll spend some time going over updates for pavement markings, as well as highway traffic signals, and then some of the major changes for bicycle facilities. We'll go to the next slide. We'll jump right into part 2. We can go to the next one. So there's a lot of new signs in the new TMUTCD, and this is something that I think we can all relate to. We're driving down the road, we see a traffic control device, we see the sign, and I think a lot of us in this room have likely seen this sign shown here on the left. So that's the lane ends merge left, that word message sign. I see that sign all the time, but in the new TMUTCD, there's a standard statement that prohibits a word message sign if there's an equivalent symbol sign that exists. And so this lane ends merge left, this sign shown here on the left, that's the word message sign. That's what we've historically used in Texas. But there's also an equivalent symbol sign, the W4-2 sign. This is the lane end symbol sign. So really these two signs, they're communicating the same thing, but now there's a standard statement that prohibits a word message sign when there's an equivalent symbol sign. So what does that mean for us? The lane ends merge left sign, that word message sign that you guys may be using in your plan sets, you guys may see those on facilities throughout your community. That word message sign is no longer included, and the appropriate sign to use is the W4-2, the lane end symbol sign. So that's just one example of a symbol sign that will now be used where a word message sign has historically been used. We're going to look at another one here in a second, but there are also a ton of other new signs and modified signs in the new TMUTCD. So just be aware, there may have been a sign that you may have used in a previous plan set. There may be some minor changes to that sign design. The sign legend may have changed. In some cases, the sign size may have changed. Just be aware, there's a lot of minor changes to the sign design. And this is one example of a sign that has changed entirely because now we have this standard statement that prohibits word messages when an equivalent symbol sign exists. Go to this slide here. So this one is an example I like to highlight because I'm always hesitant of how easily understood this symbol sign is. So this symbol sign here, I'm not confident that the average road user understands what this symbol sign means. Does it mean slippery when wet? Does it mean downstream horizontal curvature? I think those are fair questions, but what this sign means, this is the slippery when wet sign. So this sign is to be used to warn road users of a downstream slippery when wet condition. We have not historically used this sign in Texas. So if you go to the next slide, this shows the word message sign that we've historically used in Texas. Slow down on wet road. I think that's pretty easy to understand. It's a word message everyone can understand. We're communicating to the road user, slow down. There are some conditions in the roadway that will make it more safe if you slow down. But now in the new TMUTCD, because there's that standard statement that we mentioned earlier, we're not allowed to have the word message where a symbol sign exists that has an equivalent meaning. So this is just one example. There are a handful of other signs that have been removed in the new TMUTCD because the symbol sign is the appropriate sign to use moving forward. And I want to talk briefly on some of our favorite signs. So I'm sure you guys have seen some of these signs before, driving down US 75, driving on interstate, and the changeable message sign with a humorous or reference to pop culture that's included in the message. And so I still see these a lot. I actually took this picture around the holidays, but this is a humorous message that's referencing holidays and referencing Santa. So these are, they're not prohibited, but there's a recommendation against using these humorous messages. So in the new TMUTCD, there's a guidance statement that basically says these humorous messages should not be used because they're not widely understood by all road users. And going back to the beginning, what Amoni was talking about for the purpose of an effective traffic control device, we want the traffic control device to be understood by all road users. And depending on who the road user is, they may not easily understand some of these humorous messages. And so the Santa says, no, 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 it's a text on the go. It's not prohibited, but it's recommended to not use those messages on those changeable message signs. I see some folks shaking their head. There are studies on both sides showing that these are effective, these are not effective. Ultimately, FHWA has cited some studies, cited some resources, and so these are recommended to not be used moving forward. This one's a fun one here. Get your head out of your apps. Maybe not the most appropriate message. Again, it's not really going to be understood by all road users, and so it's a recommendation that that's not used on changeable message signs. We'll jump ahead to part 3. So we're going to spend a few minutes going over some of the major changes for pavement markings. And one of the big changes and some new content that's included in the new TMUTCD is aesthetic surface treatments. So you guys have likely seen pavement markings and crosswalks similar to what's shown here on the screen. So we have the brick pavers that are contained within the transverse line of the crosswalk. In the new TMUTCD, aesthetic surface treatment is included. And so aesthetic surface treatments are allowed, but the key thing is the aesthetic surface treatment cannot interfere with any traffic control device. And purely, these are really just aesthetic surface treatments. They're not providing any regulatory message. They're not providing any warning message or any guiding message. So these are purely just for aesthetic purposes. One of the key things is we cannot interfere or mimic other traffic control devices. So if we had the brick paver, what's shown here between the white transverse lines, if that was somehow interfering with the transverse line for the crosswalk marking, that would not be compliant. That's impacting the effectiveness of the traffic control device. And so that would be unacceptable. But what's shown here is acceptable because all we have is the transverse lines on each side of the brick paver. And then we have the brick paver that's serving just a purely aesthetic treatment purpose. And it's not providing any message to warn, regulate, or guide road users. I do want to mention also with aesthetic surface treatments, there is language in the new TMUTCD that prohibits any political or advocacy messages for devices within the roadway. So those are not allowed. I know that's been in the news a lot recently, but any political or advocacy message within the roadway is not allowed. And that's just to have roadways that are safe, that are not going to distract road users or encourage road users to be in an unsafe position when they're standing in the road looking at different art and street art within the roadway. If we go to the next slide, we'll hit on some of the new changes for colored pavement. You guys have likely seen colored pavement throughout Texas, throughout the country, because it's been around for a while. So the new colored pavement that's included in the new TMUTCD is green, red, and purple. These have been around for a while through interim approval through FHWA, but they're officially now included in the new TMUTCD. So what that means is if you're designing a bike lane or you're designing a transit facility, you can use colored pavement to increase the conspicuity of that facility. There's no requirement for you to use this colored pavement, but if you are going to use the colored pavement, it's limited to these different types of facilities. So what that means, if you guys are working on a bike lane or you have a bike lane project that you're looking at in the future, you're not required to use green pavement. But if you do use green pavement, you are limited to only having that within the bicycle facility. So here in this image, the colors appear a little off, but the green is within the, it's the full width of the bike lane that's used to increase the conspicuity. The adjacent bus only lane that has the full width red pavement because red is reserved for public transit facilities. And then there are other colored pavement that's not shown here in this picture, but purple can be used to increase the conspicuity of those electronic toll facilities and those lanes that have those reserved lanes. If we go to the next slide, we're going to spend a few minutes going over some of the major changes for signals. And so one of the big changes is related to signal warrants. So in the civil engineering industry and as traffic engineers, we're often completing signal warrants. And that's basically an engineering study to determine, is a traffic control signal appropriate to install at this intersection? Historically, warrants have been a standard, meaning all practitioners shall complete a signal warrant analysis as part of a study to determine if a traffic control signal is appropriate. But that has now changed to a guidance statement. So what that means is we went from a shall to a should. And so a should, it's still a strong, powerful statement. We still should do the engineering study that includes signal warrant analysis, but there's more flexibility. And so beyond just the signal warrant, practitioners now have more flexibility. You can look at other characteristics of the intersection. You can look at other data that's available. It's not just the 9 signal warrants and the criteria for that. There are other characteristics that we can consider. And the idea is to have more flexibility for agencies. If you're looking at an intersection and maybe it's not quite meeting warrants, but you think there are other factors that should be considered, there's more flexibility for those cases. On the next slide, I want to briefly go over a big item that's related to bicycle signals. So again, bicycle signals have been around for quite a while. They've been around for almost 10 years through FHWA's interim approval. I know there are some in Dallas and down in Austin, they're throughout the state. So these have been allowed in Texas and throughout the country through interim approval, but they're now officially included in the new TMUTCD. So this is just an excerpt from the TMUTCD that shows the bicycle signal faces. You have the bicycle signal indications, so typical red, yellow, green indications. And if these are used, it's a requirement to have a bike lane. You can't have a shared bicycle and vehicle lane. You need to have an exclusive bike lane if a bicycle signal face is used. And then the placement of the bicycle signal face, it's typically on the far side of the intersection. The size of these bicycle signals are about 8 inches to 12 inches. And then you can have a near side bicycle signal face supplementing for those larger intersections. But the key thing is there's no requirement to use bicycle signal faces, but if there's value in controlling the bicycle movement differently from the adjacent vehicle lane, then a bicycle signal face is another tool in the toolbox, and it could be an effective way to serve bicyclists and improve mobility and safety for the cyclist. So we're going to jump ahead to part 9. Again, we're just highlighting some of the major changes. There's a lot of content in the new TMUTCD. We just want to highlight some of the major changes. And we're going to talk briefly about the Part 9 bicycle facility updates. So in the new TMUTCD, different types of bicycle lanes are now officially defined. So the image quality it's appearing a little off on the screen here, but we'll walk through each of these images that are shown here on the screen. So what's shown on the left, that's your typical conventional bicycle lane. You guys have probably seen that driving around your community. So we have the bicycle lane with a longitudinal line that separates the bicycle lane from the adjacent vehicle lane. That's pretty typical. We have the appropriate markings and the appropriate devices to communicate that to the road user and to the cyclist. Here in the middle, we have a buffer separated bicycle lane. And so what that means is, again, we have the bicycle lane, but adjacent to the bicycle lane, we have a buffered marking pattern that separates the bicycle lane from the adjacent vehicle lane. So this is purely just a pattern of markings that separates the bicycle lane from the adjacent vehicle lane. And then the image on the far right, this is a separated bike lane. So this is in the more urban areas. That's where you have a vertical element that separates the bike lane from the adjacent vehicle lane. So whether it's a curb or a post or some type of vertical element that separates the bike lane, shown here, from the adjacent vehicle lane. So this right here is intended to illustrate a raised element that separates the bike lane from the adjacent vehicle lane. And that's important because these are now defined in the new TMUTCD, and there's a lot of content in the new TMUTCD. If you guys are working on a project or working on a study with these bike lanes, there's different devices that are appropriate for these different types of bike lanes. Another big change, and this is just really into the details, but want to make you guys aware of this. So historically, there have been 3 options for the markings that are used within a bicycle lane. And so we're showing those 3 here. So previously, we had the option to use the bike symbol marking, the helmeted bicyclist symbol marking, and the word message bike lane marking. But in the new TMUTCD, the helmeted bicyclist symbol, what's shown here in the center, that's no longer included in the new TMUTCD. So I don't think FHWA or any other parties involved are communicating that bicyclists should not wear helmets. That's not what the message is. But the message is we want to be uniform. We want to have uniformity across the state, uniformity across the country. In order to achieve that, the helmeted bicyclist symbol has been removed, and the bike symbol and word legend marking, those are the appropriate markings to have installed for those bike lanes. Yeah, it's a great question. This is consistent with the recommendations included in the FHWA final rule for the MUTCD 11th edition. And so I agree with you. I think it is an inconsistency, but in order to have uniformity and to be consistent with the federal manual, this is what was included. The question was, by the way, if anybody couldn't hear in the back, why is there an apparent inconsistency with, we're still allowing the word message here for this bike lane facility, but earlier, one of the first slides that I presented how there's now a push towards symbol signs. It's a fair point. There are a handful of other instances like that that I've noticed in the manual, but this is consistent with the federal manual. And in order to be in substantial conformance with the federal manual, this is what was adopted, consistent with the federal MUTCD.
Federal MUTCD.
Federal MUTCD. Yep. So yeah, Amoni briefly mentioned the federal MUTCD. That was released December 2023, and that was our starting point for the development of the TMUTCD. So we took the federal MUTCD and we used that to build the new TMUTCD. We referenced the previous 2011 TMUTCD very closely, but we used the 11th edition as our starting point. And so there were a lot of limitations on what we could change in order to still be in substantial conformance. Great questions, and we're going to make sure we leave time at the end for any other questions because that's what we want. We want to hear questions, hear things that are most relevant for you guys. So I want to go over a few frequently asked questions. So where we stand today, what is the current TMUTCD that should be used? So if you hit the next slide, this table here, it might be a little small for the folks in the back, but this is a really important table that defines the timeline and implementation of the new TMUTCD. And the key date that I want to point out, January 18th, 2026. So that's next week. That's when the new TMUTCD takes effect. And so this is why it's really important that all practitioners, consultants, city engineers, DOT engineers that are aware, there's a new TMUTCD that takes effect next week, and we need to start using that TMUTCD. So this row here, the second from the bottom, this is really important. So from January 18th through June 30th, 2026, there's flexibility on which TMUTCD we use. So the keyword that I want to highlight here is should. So practitioners and agencies should comply with the 2025 TMUTCD during this period from January 18th through June 30th, 2026. We should comply, but it's not a shall statement because we realize that's not feasible for agencies and for organizations to flip a switch and then immediately begin using the TMUTCD starting next week. That's just not feasible for a lot of agencies across the state. So we should comply, but if it's not practical, there's flexibility and we can continue using the 2011 TMUTCD up until June 30th, 2026. After June 30th, 2026, this is really important. This is the last row in this table. After June 30th, 2026, that's when it's a requirement. So then agencies shall comply with the 2025 TMUTCD. So we have some time. If it's not feasible for your current projects, you have some time, but beginning July 1st, 2026, that's when we're required to comply with the new TMUTCD. We're going to go over one or two other frequently asked questions, and then we'll be sure to leave time for any other questions that you guys might have. But this is a common question that I get asked a lot. So let's say you guys just recently completed a project, you installed a traffic control device, and when you look at the 2025 TMUTCD, you see that that traffic control device that you just installed last month or last year, it's no longer compliant. What does that mean? So if you have a traffic control device that is no longer compliant with the new 2025 TMUTCD, are you, as the agency, responsible for immediately removing that device? I see some folks shaking their head, and that's exactly right. We're not responsible for immediately removing that device. That device can remain in place until it reaches the end of its service life. And then when that device is no longer serviceable, so let's say you guys recently just installed the left lane ends, merge left, that word message sign that we looked at earlier, that sign can remain until it reaches the end of its service life. And then when that sign is no longer serviceable, when it's reinstalled, it would need to be compliant with the new sign that's appropriate. That would be the lane end symbol sign that we looked at earlier. So that's really important. It's important that we start using the new TMUTCD, but there's no expectation if there's a device that's no longer compliant that we have to immediately remove that device and install it with a new device that's compliant. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. And let's say an agency has an inventory of devices that they've historically used when that temporary work is needed, and you need to have these signs and other devices installed. Still, we would still go back to that table. So July 1st, 2026, if there's a device that an agency has in their inventory that's no longer compliant, beyond that point, any of those temporary traffic control projects that they're working on, if that device is no longer compliant, then they can't use that device after that. It's a good point because, yeah, agencies might have an inventory of devices. They've used them the past 10, 15 years, but with the new 2025 TMUTCD, when that effective date of July 1st, 2026, when it's a shall, at that point, it's a requirement to have only devices that are compliant. So before we open it up for questions, Amoni and I have been very involved, and many other folks on my team, a lot of folks are in the audience here, have been very involved these past 2.5 years, and working on this exciting manual has been really enjoying, really great experience. But you also developed some unusual hobbies as part of this project, and one of those hobbies is finding non-compliant traffic control devices. So that's what we're highlighting here on this slide. And so these images shown here on the left, these are signs that are not compliant. Some of them are pretty obvious what the issue is. Some of them are a little more nuanced, but myself, Amoni, Hanak, and others on our team often take photos of devices that we see that are not compliant. So these are just a handful of devices. What's shown here on the left, these are not good, these are not compliant. The signs shown here on the right, these are the appropriate signs to use. So we just want to kind of highlight that, just highlight a few examples, and then we're happy to answer any questions. But I think we still have a few minutes, and then we're also happy to stick around and answer any questions and discuss with you guys one-on-one. Yes, sir. Yes. So even if it's a private road, if the road is open to the public, they apply to every road. Yes. Yes, sir. Question over here. Great question. So the question is, what about the other supplemental manuals, the SHSD, the Sign Crew Field Book, Freeway Guide Sign Book, and other resources? Timeline is not yet finalized for that. TxDOT is fully aware of the necessary updates to those resources, and so those will be updated over the next year, but there's no timeline that's been communicated on those. But it's something that TxDOT is actively looking at. Yes. That's the intent. Yeah, the intent is to be consistent with the 2025 TMUTCD. So if there's a message that has historically been used in the Sign Crew Field Book and it's not consistent with the 2025 TMUTCD, the intent is to update those past resources to be consistent with the 2025 TMUTCD. And the 2025 TMUTCD, as I mentioned, that takes effect next week. It's online today. You guys can go to TxDOT's webpage and take a look at it. And that takes effect next week. I did see a couple other hands Yes, sir.
Yeah. I don't know what this, but I wasn't very correctly.
All right, so just to make sure I'm understanding the question, if we go, this one is fine. So you're saying agencies are still painting the entire lane width green, the full width of the bicycle lane green, but they don't have any supplemental markings within the bike lane? Okay, yes. So the supplemental bike lane markings are required within the bike lane. You do need the bike lane markings. If you go ahead a few slides in part 9, I think it's the second slide in part 9. This one. So these markings are required in the bike lane, regardless of if the green pavement is used or if we don't have any colored pavement used. These markings are required within the bike lane. Agencies often, what I've seen, this is a common marking that's used within bike lanes. The helmeted bicyclist symbol, I see that commonly throughout the state and throughout the country. This marking within the bike lane is no longer compliant, and these two, the bike symbol and the word legend marking, those are what's now compliant and what's included in the new TMUTCD. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Yes. Yeah, great question. So I'm going to paraphrase the question, but who is the MUTCD police and how is it enforced for these devices that are not compliant? That's what I'm hearing, right? There is no MUTCD police. That's the honest answer. So as practitioners, as professionals, we're all responsible for it. That's on the consultant side, on the agency side. And so, yeah, there's no MUTCD police or any party that enforces this. There are some potential consequences if an agency does use devices that are not compliant. So let's say an agency with the new TMUTCD that rolls out and they review the TMUTCD, assuming they review the TMUTCD, and they move forward doing what they've done historically in the past. I wouldn't recommend that, but one of the major consequences that could come from that is there could be tort liability claims, meaning we have lawsuits and things like that. If somebody is injured at these intersections, at these roadway facilities, there could be lawsuits that come from that. And then in some rare cases, we have heard of FHWA withholding federal funding from some agencies that are not following the appropriate MUTCD or the state MUTCD. So there's no real enforcement, but the potential consequences are withholding of federal funding and also potentially lawsuits that could come. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Yes. For the bikes, you said?
Yes. Consistent with the signal. Just remind us, stop sign. Cycles don't.
Yeah. So the question is related to rules of the road and almost of, so yeah, by law, if the red bicycle indication is displayed, and in Texas, bicyclists are vehicles, so they are required to obey the traffic control devices and the appropriate indications. I hear you though. There's a question of how likely is that to be followed?
And you show yellow.
You show yellow when there's a stop signs. No. So you're saying a stop sign that would be installed to communicate to cyclists and then also a bicycle signal thing? I don't believe so, no. Sorry for misunderstanding your question. That's a good question though. Yes, yeah. I'm trying to think if there's a rare exception where you have an unsignalized intersection and just the bicyclist is controlled by a bicycle signal, and I can't think of one. Yeah, this is most commonly at signalized intersections, the adjacent vehicle lanes are controlled by a traffic control signal. Yeah, exactly. I can't think of an exception where we would have an unsignalized intersection, but we would have a bike lane for the, or a bike signal for the bike lane. All right, another question? Yes, sir.
Seems to me that might wind up getting politicized in some places where people basically think the traffic is going too fast, so they want a stoplight every 500 feet. I mean, and I haven't attended quite a few city council meetings. That sentiment is not uncommon. We put a stoplight at every intersection. And I'm just wondering what you think.
Yes, I agree with the statement. It's something we've heard from the industry as well the past year. My response is it's still a guidance statement, so it's still a really strong statement. And the only time we should be deviating from a guidance statement is when we have really good engineering studies, really good research backing why it's not appropriate to follow that guidance statement. But I hear you though, in practice, that gets to council. Council understands that this is now a guidance statement. We have more flexibility. Let's put a signal here, let's put a signal there. And it does cause a challenge. But my response would be, from the engineering side, it's still a guidance statement, and we still need to follow those guidance statements unless we have a really good reason not to follow. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes, sir. Yep. Yep. Yes.
So is that something that we can expect in the next updates or something?
Yes. So the question is other indications that are used to communicate to automated vehicles. That's the question, basically. Yeah. So we didn't have a lot of time to go over part 5, but part 5 is a new part in the TMUTCD. It's focused on considerations for automated vehicles. It's a really small part, but it's something we expect to expand a lot in the future. So right now, it's really just considerations for automated vehicles. But yes, to answer your question, we expect that to be expanded a lot in the future. Right now, it's not currently included in part 5, but that's something we expect to expand a lot in the next revision and future updates.
Is there anything in there yet about aircraft taxis or anything like that that's contemplated?
Great question. The question is, any content related to aircraft taxis and things like that in the new TMUTCD? No, that content is not included at this point. I think you're right. We've seen, so the last TMUTCD was from 2011. The new TMUTCD is 2025. Automated vehicles have really evolved since then. So there's a lot of considerations, a lot of new things that are being discussed related to automated vehicles, but that's not included in the new TMUTCD. But I would not be surprised if in the future, for future revisions, future updates, we see a lot of new changes related to automated vehicles. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of agencies that would be involved with that. So yeah, that's correct. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. Well, really appreciate you guys attending. We're happy to stick around. And if there are any other questions or site-specific questions, we're happy to discuss with you guys. Yes.
Thank you so much, everyone. Firstly, thank you, Wes and Amoni. It was a great presentation. I myself am a big fan of MUTCD and TMUTCD from my college days. And it was really great to have a comprehensive and clear understanding of what to expect in the future. Thank you all the participants over here in the stage who are attending online. You were great. And if you have any more questions or thoughts, as Wes already said, Wes and Amoni are available if you have more thoughts. And if the time is now 11:40, so we have the key luncheon session. Carlos will give some quick updates on that.
Yes, thank you, Mino. So for our main presentation in the adjacent room, we will have Jeff Williams presenting on the Medal of Honor Museum and the Arlington Grand Prix, which is just around the corner next month. Very exciting things. The museum's already open, so please head out back to the lobby, get your name tags. I still have to get mine, and then wander in for the main presentation. Again, I want to thank Mino and congratulate her for moderating her first one here. So let's all give her a round of applause. She did a great job. And thank you all. We'll see you guys next time.